Motion and performance capture is a relatively new form of acting performance. It's been used in animations and movies with CGI characters, although it is mostly used in modern video games that take place in a 3D environment. If you don't know what motion capture is, essentially an actor will put on a skin-tight suit, some markers can be placed on them, and then cameras and sensors around the room will pick up their movement, so the data from that movement can be taken and placed on a digital model. Ever since Detroit Become Human, released in 2018, I've been fascinated by motion capture, as that game used it a lot. And I really do mean a lot. I'm so grateful that I've now been able to do motion capture myself, and it truly is one of my favourite forms of acting. However, I do have some issues personally. I have hypermobility, which means my muscles and joints tire more quickly than the average person. I also had corrective hip surgery when I was 12, which left me with with an unusual gait, as you can probably see from the footage behind me. As I am not the fully abled average person, it did lead me to question as to whether both the motion capture hardware and software was able to capture my movements accurately. But what about other disabled people? Despite my setbacks, I'm quite fortunate that I have full control over my limbs, and therefore I'm able to perform a T-pose, which is vital for motion capture, as it's how the system initially recognises a person to be captured. I'm not a wheelchair user, but I thought I could test this by sitting on a chair to see if the system could capture me at all. Initially, there were some reflections on the back of the chair, which the system thought were markers. So if the wheelchair were to have any reflective parts, that's issue number one. Secondly, if I sat all the way back in the chair, the markers on my back were not able to be captured. So if the wheelchair doesn't have a low back, or the person isn't able to lean forward, that's issue number two. Once we were able to capture me, the software got very confused. I had literally no idea why this happened, and neither did anyone else, but it thought I was some very thin and stretched out Slenderman individual. Which brings us to issue number 3, of not being depicted accurately in motion capture if you're a wheelchair user or unable to stand to perform a T-pose. I think it's a real shame because it shows why there's a distinct lack of disabled representation in video games via motion capture performance. Take The Sims, for example. There's a few options in terms of skin discoloration, scars, and hearing aids, but everyone moves, walks, and runs the exact same, whether the character is made by the player or if it's an NPC. Nobody uses a wheelchair or crutches or shows any signs of being different from anyone else. In a game where you're invited to unleash your imagination, I don't think it's a good thing that that world has to be imagined without disabilities. Obviously, I'm picking on The Sims a little bit, but there is a distinct lack of physical disability representation across all games. Even games where they show an NPC to have a physical disability, as soon as they're affected by the player, a miracle happens and they're able to walk and run like everybody else. Not that I'm saying you should be able to beat up disabled characters in video games. Well, this isn't a good look for me, is it? Anyway, there are better cases of characters being shown with physical disabilities in video games. The 3 I'll talk about are Carl Manfred from Detroit Become Human, Venom Snake from Metal Gear Solid 5, and Proctor Ingram from Fallout 4. Carl Manfred has his voice and motion performance provided by Lance Henriksen. Carl uses a wheelchair, whereas Lance doesn't and is able to walk. Venom Snake has his voice and motion performance provided by Kiefer Sutherland. Venom Snake has a prosthetic arm, whereas Kiefer doesn't. Are you starting to see a pattern here? And Proctor Ingram has her voice provided by Carrie Walgren. Ingram has both her legs amputated and uses power armor to walk around, similar to as if someone had prosthetic legs. However, Carrie isn't a double amputee and is therefore a fully abled person. As you can see, if a character has some form of physical disability, they're not played by someone with the same disability, or a disability at all. And I get the argument that they're actors, the whole point is to portray characters they're not, but disabled actors exist. Shouldn't they be the ones filling the roles of these disabled characters? Plus, I think it would make for a much more compelling and authentic character if they're played by someone who has the same disability. You may have noticed that I said Carrie Walgren only provides her voice for Proctor Ingram, so why even bring her up in my motion capture argument at all? Well, that's simply my point. The great thing about motion capture is that it can be done completely separate from the voice acting.
So, if a character has to have a certain voice and move a certain way, you can have two different people doing those two things separately. Therefore, you could have a disabled person doing the motion capture of a disabled character, and have someone else do the voice if you so choose.
And thanks to my friend Adam there, who provided his voice to help prove my point. This brings us to the why. Why is there a lack of physically disabled actors in motion capture? As you saw earlier, it seems to be a limitation of the system. The T-pose itself is inaccessible to certain disabled individuals, and it doesn't get much better. I did some motion capture for this video, which included a range of things, running, walking, jumping, things that just showed how I move differently from the average person. But weirdly enough, the thing that showed the software failing the most was me standing on one leg, specifically my left leg, for 60 seconds. Due to my previous corrective hip surgery, my hips are much wider than the average man. So when I was balancing on my left leg, the system was struggling to figure out what to do with my right leg. The data points on my body were a whole leg width over from where the system thought my leg should be. Therefore, when placed in the Unreal 5 engine, the digital model looks like its leg has been horrendously broken and twisted, with the foot pointing one direction and the knee pointing another direction, which obviously was not happening in real life. All of this sadly answers why there's a lack of disabled people in motion capture. The skin-tight suits, the T-pose are huge barriers, and even if you're able to get past all of that, the system itself might not even capture you accurately. I truly believe that something needs to change in the motion capture industry, because I love video games. I think they're a great medium for telling amazing stories and unique experiences. And while they are fiction, the best stories come from real people in the real world. Therefore, disabled people should be able to see themselves represented accurately in these incredible stories. But that won't happen unless motion capture becomes accessible for everyone.